Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, 4 Israeli hostages have been rescued from Gaza and have been reunited with their families in Israel. Special Forces soldiers extracted the hostages from the coastal enclave 8 months after they were taken from Israel by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. In a daring and dangerous daytime raid in the heart of Gaza, police officers from the elite Yamam counterterrorism unit and agents from Shin Bet simultaneously raided 2 buildings and rescued the captives who were being held in civilian homes. Noah Argamani, Shloimi Ziv, Almog Mir-Jan, and Andrei Kozlov were taken immediately to the hospital, where doctors examined them and determined that they were suffering from severe malnutrition and repeated abuse. All 4 captives were held in the homes of Gazan civilians, including a doctor and writer for Al Jazeera. 1 Israeli soldier was killed in the mission to recover the hostages from the Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Yochanan has more on that story.
Yes, Rebecca, Chief Inspector of the elite Yamam unit, Arnon Zamora, was killed by Hamas terrorists as he led the mission to rescue 4 hostages held in the Gaza Strip. The special operation to rescue the hostages was named Arnon in a sign of solidarity and collective mourning for Zamora's heroism and ultimate sacrifice. Thousands of Israelis stood on the street of Zamora's hometown of Mevetzer Tzion as the family made their way to the military cemetery on Mount Herzl. The burial was attended by thousands of others who wished to comfort the family and let them know that they are not grieving alone.
Israel is preparing to face off against the Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. The Iranian proxy army has fired over 19,000 rockets into northern Israel since October 7th, prompting the evacuation of dozens of communities near the border with Lebanon. Hezbollah has also begun to fire advanced and ballistic missiles, which have a much longer range and pose a threat to communities deep within the Jewish state. Just as Jews began to celebrate the holiday of Shavuot last week, Hezbollah unleashed a barrage of rockets into Israel. A few hours later, the commander of Hezbollah's Nasser unit, who ordered the attacks, was killed in a precision strike 15 kilometers inside of Lebanon. The terror group vowed revenge and sent another lobby of missiles into Israel, igniting several wildfires.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in the Middle East last week, lobbying Israel and its neighbors to support President Joe Biden's ceasefire agreement. Blinken traveled to Jordan and Egypt before arriving in Israel, where he met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer, along with National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi. Just as Blinken was wrapping up his 8th wartime trip to Israel, he was informed that Hamas had amended the proposal, making outrageous demands that could not be met. The American diplomat expressed his frustration with the terror group for rejecting the plan, which is virtually identical to one that Hamas submitted back in early May.
The Jewish state is battling Islamic terrorists on 7 fronts simultaneously. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israeli forces are battling Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria, Palestinian terrorists in Judea and Samaria, and directly against Iran, which is the head of the serpent. He stressed the gravity of the situation, saying, "Our future will not exist here against the axis of evil of Iran and its proxies if we simply fold our hands." He said the Jewish state has no choice but to finish the fight against Hamas in Gaza and to free the hostages because the future of the state of Israel is at stake.
The United States House of Representatives passed a bill to sanction the International Criminal Court for issuing arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Congress praised the bipartisan passage of the measure, which will hopefully force President Biden into a necessary dialogue with American lawmakers. Biden has opposed sanctioning the ICC for its outlandish behavior, and the bill will most likely be vetoed if it crosses his desk. National Security spokesman John Kirby announced that the Biden administration does not believe sanctioning the ICC is the answer.
The White House has pledged to give an additional $404 million to the Palestinians, making the United States their largest supporter. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken attended an emergency aid for Gaza conference in Jordan, where he announced the new aid package. He said that the $404 million in aid will be in addition to the more than $1.8 billion in development, economic, and humanitarian aid that the United States has provided to the Palestinians since 2021, making the United States the largest single-country provider of assistance for Palestinians.
Right-wing parties gained ground in the recent European Union elections. This dramatic shift is a striking display of the public's opposition to Europe's immigration policies, as well as the EU's anti-Israel policies. An EU official told Israel's Ynet News that the rise of the European political right is the result of the increasing opposition to the influx of immigrants and their growing power on the continent, especially the Arabs. He added that the next EU Parliament is expected to be friendlier towards Israel.
American universities have received over $13 billion from Arab states, including Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. This money has been distributed to schools in 49 states throughout the country. Cornell University is reportedly the largest recipient of Arab funds, and Georgetown University is a close second. Since the October 7th Hamas massacre of 1,200 people in Israel, U.S. campuses have been rocked by anti-Israel protests. Analysts have questioned if the pro-Hamas riots were funded or encouraged by state actors and have been investigating the source of university funding. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, recently praised the activists for forming a new branch of the resistance front.
In a shocking move, the United Nations has listed Israel alongside Hamas and Islamic Jihad for alleged rights violations against children in armed conflict. The so-called list of shame cites falsified casualty numbers provided by the Hamas-run Ministry of Health. The world body claims that Israel has earned a spot on the list alongside hostile state actors and terrorist groups. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded, saying, "The UN has put itself on the black list of history when it joined the supporters of the Hamas murderers." He stressed that the IDF is the most moral army in the world, and no delusional decision by the UN will change that.
Arab terrorists are taking advantage of the hot and dry summer conditions to intentionally burn as much of the land of Israel as they can. These fires threaten Jewish and Arab communities throughout Judea and Samaria and have devastated large portions of the biblical heartland. The Israel Fire and Rescue Services reported that they battled more than 600 fires in open areas in Judea and Samaria last week alone. It noted that 90% of the blazes were started intentionally and that many of them targeted IDF bases in the region.
El Al, Israel's national airline carrier, is in negotiations to expand its fleet by purchasing 30 new Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. El Al posted positive profits after many international carriers suspended service to the Jewish state. The Israeli airline continues to hold a semi-monopoly on travel to Israel, as many companies have still not reinstated their service to the Holy Land. El Al is reportedly prepared to spend up to $2.5 billion for the aircraft, which will be delivered over several years, starting in 2027.
The Israel Allies Foundation hosted a VIP ceremony for Jewish and Christian leaders and government officials to address escalating anti-Semitism in Canada. The event was held immediately following the United Jewish Appeals Walk for Israel March, which brought out crowds of over 50,000 people in Toronto. During the reception, Christian and Jewish leaders signed a resolution that vehemently denounces the proliferation of anti-Semitism throughout Canada. The proclamation demands to secure Jewish people from abuse, pursuing legal measures to prosecute anti-Semitic crimes. The leaders also called for the immediate release of the remaining hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Josh Reinstein, the president of the Israel Allies Foundation, said, "We stand at a critical juncture where the rise of anti-Semitism threatens the very fabric of our society, and it is imperative that we take decisive action to combat this dangerous trend."
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Pastor Jim Scudder from In Grace Ministries. Jim, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Josh. Great to see you.
So tell us, our viewers, a little about what are you doing in Israel?
Well, we are on a delegation trip with the NRB. So it's a group of Christian communicators in the United States. 1,600 members. It's huge. We have a reach of, I think it's 190 million people can watch or listen to the programming from the NRB. And it's a very pro-Israel group in the U.S., like 100% pro-Israel. And so we came here with NRB, our president, Troy Miller, and some others to fact find and show solidarity.
NRB has been the talk of the town lately because at their annual convention, they passed a resolution recognizing that from now on, Christian broadcasters should not say West Bank. They should only refer to the land as Judea and Samaria. Why is that significant?
I came here in November to film a In Grace episode about the aftermath of the war. I called it Israel's Five-Way War, and I talk about Gaza, the North, Iran, the media, but then I said West Bank. I know that's not a good term to use because it actually has a meaning that it's not Israel's, but it's just a common phrase. And so some people called me on it, and I re-edited it and voice-overed the whole thing, and it cost us money to do that. It's the Bible name. You know that. It's the biblical name. Why are we calling it anything other than the biblical name, especially as Christians? And it also implies that it doesn't belong to Israel, and it does. So the resolution, I think, is astounding that Troy Miller, the board, and the NRB passed this to say, listen, to all of our members, we need to use the Bible words, Judea and Samaria.
You know, it's obvious to anyone who reads the Bible, where is Judea and Samaria? But a lot of people, I understood, didn't know that the West Bank is Judea and Samaria. They thought they were two different locations. Like
Abraham,
there's the West Bank.
Isaac, Jacob, Jesus, everybody, they were in Judea and Samaria.
Yeah,
so
I mean, Shiloh, Hebron. Yeah. These are all the altars of our faith.
Yeah, you know, America's Route 66. You have a Route 60, and it's just right through the heartland. It's the heartland of Israel.
So now that Christians are starting to use the terminology and say Judea and Samaria, are people in the Christian community coming out and saying we need to safeguard Judea and Samaria, that needs to always stay in Israel's hands? Because the Biden administration has been very vocal that they want us to give it away.
That's the next step for us to educate our viewers and listeners, because I don't think every Christian understands that. Don't divide the land. It's already small. We stood on a lookout in Samaria. We could see Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport, Jerusalem. 9 miles. If you give the West Bank as a state for the Palestinians, you have a 9-mile width of Israel. That's not possible, especially the highlands of Samaria. So I think we're going to do better at educating Christians that it should not be divided. Keep God's Land is an initiative, a coalition of people trying to say, let's not divide. Two-state solution is not tenable, and the Palestinians don't want it. They want a one-state solution. They don't want Israel here. And so don't give away God's land is our message.
Well, being here in Israel, you can understand that the two-state solution is dead. I mean, no one's talking about a two-state solution. It's not going to happen.
Well,
but the Biden administration is trying to push it. So
right.
Where do you see the difference here?
I don't know. I just think it's people don't understand. They don't understand how it's not a possibility anymore. You pulled out of Gaza, literally pulled out. Gave them a state in essence. It could have been a Singapore. It could have been this beautiful place on the Mediterranean. And they used all the money that we gave for tunnels and weapons. And we interviewed soldiers on this trip. And they said they went into Gaza and every room, including the backpack of a girl, schools, hospitals, full of weapons. So if you pull out of Judea and Samaria, same thing's going to happen. Another genocide, another attempt at annihilation will happen if Israel does that. So we're going to pressure our leaders to not give up God's land and maybe look at David Friedman's plan, a really good starting point for how Israel can solve the crisis and the issue.
Well, we're here in the middle of a war, yet we're seeing a lot of Christians coming and standing with Israel, delegations like yours, pastors coming here. Do you feel safe? How is it like to be in Israel?
Yeah, so yesterday I was doing a segment for our show, and I'm standing in the new city of Jerusalem by our hotel, and there's people, kids, strollers, music, outside eating, and I'm like, this is a war, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, and we heard some booms when we were in Kfar Aza, one of the kibbutzim that was affected. It certainly is happening, but when you're in Israel, this whole time we haven't noticed except when we were right by Gaza.
As a Christian who believes in the Bible, how exciting is it to see the Bible come alive, to be able to read your Bible and walk the streets and see that it's a real thing, that these are real places and real locations?
Yeah, Josh, you are proof that there is a God, and he's promised a people, a land forever. And the fact that you've survived attempts at annihilation from Haman to Hitler to Hamas, why is it all the H's, you know? But the land is proof, that the people in the land are proof of God. It's a miracle. It's incredible what's happening with the land, with the prosperity that the Jewish people are able to afford from the land. I love it because all the places I read about, there's a spot, there's a place, there's a hill, and it all fits exactly with what the Bible says.
Jim, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think the message is simple. Come to Israel, see it for yourself. Come here to see the land and to offer your support for this amazing place.
Jim, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now, the truth from Zion.
Since the outbreak of the brutal civil war in Syria in March of 2011, more than 615,000 lives have been lost, with countless more displaced and injured. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is a dictator with blood on his hands. He has managed to cling to power by using horrific chemical weapons and relentless violence against his own people. Millions have fled the country to save their lives. Iran saw the opportunity to expand its influence and further its agenda of terror and destruction amid the chaos and carnage in Syria. Occupying Syria serves Iran's demonic drive to destroy the state of Israel, which shares a border with Syria. Syria has always been Israel's enemy and is a willing partner in Iran's plan to wipe the Jewish state off the map. Syria attacked Israel in 1967 during the Six-Day War. Israel won that war and was able to take back the Golan Heights. This mountainous, lush part of northern Israel is not only biblically historic for the Jewish people, but having it under Israeli control also strengthens Israel's security. When Syria occupied the area, its army used the vantage point and elevation to shoot at Israelis living below. Once Israel liberated the territory, the Israel Defense Force was able to secure a safer life for Israeli civilians. The love affair between Damascus and Tehran began in 1979, when Syria was the only country to support the Islamic Republic's violent overthrow of the Shah of Iran. The ties between the two radical Islamic states have only grown stronger over the intervening years. Iran currently has 55 military bases in Syria and another 515 military positions, mostly deployed around the suburbs of Aleppo and the capital Damascus. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been able to remain in power due to the financial, political, and military might of Iran's dictatorial regime. The price he pays is to make Syrian territory available to Iran, regardless of how dangerous and detrimental it is for his own countrymen.
Since Assad's bloody civil war in Syria, Iran has used Syrian territory to coordinate its proxy war against Israel. Whether it be smuggling weapons, training, or terror coordination, fighting Iranian elements in Syria has been a major component of this war.
2011 saw the outbreak of civil war as the Syrian people became disenchanted with the brutal Assad regime. As Syrians took to the streets in protest, Assad gave the order to his generals to use deadly chemical weapons on the demonstrators. The world stood by silently as the death toll rose from the hundreds to the thousands to the hundreds of thousands. Tehran did not want to see Assad lose power because he was facilitating Iran's presence along the border with Israel. Iran propped up Assad's regime through the transfer of weapons, military training, and economic aid. During this time, Assad and his puppet government violently suppressed any and all opposition. Israel, in its unwavering commitment to self-defense, repeatedly strikes Iranian targets in Syria, thwarting the enemy's attempts to entrench themselves along Israel's sovereign eastern border. Jerusalem has made it clear that it will not sit idly by while Damascus and Tehran plot the destruction of Israel. Recently, the world witnessed a significant blow to Iran's operations in Syria with the elimination of top commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps who were directing Tehran's nefarious activities in the region. Numerous terror leaders, including Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi, were assassinated at a military headquarters near the Iranian consulate in Damascus. Israel did not claim responsibility for the attack. Nevertheless, Iran blamed Israel and 2 weeks later retaliated by launching more than 300 hostile unmanned aircraft and missiles toward Israel. Iran continues to prop up the brutal Assad regime that has become synonymous with tyranny and oppression, just as Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps is viewed in its own country. There can be no justification for Assad's use of chemical weapons or Iran's malevolent actions in Syria. Israel continues to monitor developments in Syria and remains vigilant against the looming threat posed by Iran and its proxies. Security is Israel's top priority, and the government stands ready to take whatever measures are necessary to defend the Jewish homeland and those who live in it. That includes not only Jews, but also Christians, Druze, and Muslim Israelis as well. The fanatical Shiite Republic of Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism around the globe. It must be defeated once and for all. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Psalm 91 says that he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High abides in the shadow of the Almighty. Now for the Jewish people, this very beautiful promise and powerful promise has a whole different meaning. If you are down in the envelope around the Gaza Strip, you will find a network of hundreds, if not thousands, of bomb shelters that are all over the place, and they have one single purpose, and that is to save lives. Just over this last couple of weeks, there were more than 12,000 missiles that came over from the Gaza Strip attacking those communities in the Gaza envelope. Since the last 10 years, the International Christian Embassy have been actively engaged to build more than 200 bomb shelters in this area to provide the necessary safety for the people of Israel. Please have a look. Just around the corner, a few meters, a few feet away from here, is a young group of young kids that are practicing and rehearsal in their sports class, and this bomb shelter will serve from them. That means if there is an alarm here in the region, they just can run out of the house and they have a safe bomb shelter here.
My name is Ivo Panchev. I'm sensei in this dojo. I'm happy to hear that Christians have an organization that donate money and chattels for this for our area. I hope that will be shalom and peace. I think it will be. If everyone wants this, so strong, will be.
When the bomb threat was becoming more and more severe, The first place that was protected against bombs were the kindergartens. We can't wait until we hear a code red or see something that's about to, on fire. We have to know what to do, spend a lot of time preparing. And we practice with the children. They know that if there's a code red when they're on a walk not near a building, then they cover their heads. They know to do it. If I'm caught between one place and the other and there's a shelter there and I can go in, then practically it's very important.
My name is Sagida Kalchan, and 4 years ago I was one of the founders to open this music school. And now we have 42 kids. Being here is something very brave. Maybe they don't necessarily understand how brave it is to be 4 kilometers from the Gaza border, but their parents do. These bomb shelters are the only reason we can have this boarding school here. We can't be here without them.
I well remember how I was speaking at a conference in Europe, and an Israeli number called me. The person asked, do I talk to Jürgen Bühler? And I said, yes, of course you do. And the person introduced himself as Shai Hermesh. He was back then a member of Knesset in Israel. And he said, Jürgen, you just saved my life. And I asked him, how is that possible? I'm right now speaking on a Bible school in Europe. It's impossible for me to save your life. He says, no, I'm living in Kfar Aza. And we just had the red alert. I had short time to run to the bomb shelter. And this bomb shelter took a direct hit from one of the missiles. And I saw a big sign inside, donated by the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. He said, Jürgen, this bomb shelter saved my life. And I want to ask you today, as you heard those many stories, how lives have been saved, how this is a game changer for many in Israel, to help us in these critical times to keep building those life-saving bomb shelters. It makes a huge difference for Israelis in schools, in kindergartens, or even outside of supermarkets to know that there is a safe place they can run immediately to it. Your donation will save lives in Israel. Thank you so much for standing with us in these critical times.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.